Hey guys, welcome back to Creating Creators Podcast. My name's Brian Pope, and on today's episode, I had the chance to sit down with Billy Ivey. Billy is a creative in the Birmingham area. He owns a company by the name of Small Stories Studios. Billy has an incredible journey that he shared with us from working in agencies all across the Southeast to the books he's written and even a short documentary that he's currently working on. I really encourage you to sort of sit back and enjoy this conversation, learn a little bit about the importance of storytelling from a master storyteller, Billy Ivey. Check it out. So, first of all, tell me, who in the world is the real Billy Ivey?
Uh, yeah, you pretty much nailed it right there. Where in the world did you get those? Is that a Facebook thing, or did you get it through
Oh,
Alignable?
no. No. I do stalk on social media a little bit in preparation for these things. So
Oh, that's
you may see a
hilarious.
few. Although I will say, I didn't have to go back very far to find, just humorous imagery from you. I mean, it seems like you on a daily basis are putting out some things. Let me say one thing as a father. I have four children myself, and I know we'll get more into your story soon, um, but I just really appreciate your willingness to humiliate your children as often as possible. I mean, these like carpool karaoke
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you do yourself with your kids are is
yeah.
is just incredible. I haven't seen one recently, but the ones I have seen, I absolutely love.
Well, sometimes those things will show up in the middle of a school year, but it's usually the first day of school. A drop off is when I do the big thing. And what's fascinating, though, Brian, is and what you're talking about for people who don't know is I'll sometimes record myself singing ridiculously loud and ridiculously off key these inspirational or um,
Are you
uh,
off key? Because to me, it sounds beautiful.
well, I didn't want to brag. It's pretty good, but I'll record that and then put it out there on the first day of school. But what's fascinating is they can all drive now. Like, I don't get to do that. And so the last couple have kind of fallen flat, no pun intended, but because I'm running after them in the yard as they're leaving for school, as opposed to me dropping them off in the line. But
Mhm.
I don't know, man. I certainly don't want to embarrass my kids to the point of humiliation, but man, it's fun to make them sweat a little bit. It really is, and they know. I mean, they know it's done out of love. I'm not trying to like harm their reputation or whatever it may be at school. But it's a lot of fun to have a lot of fun with them. Hey, are my
Well,
notifications that are coming up, are they being heard, or is it okay?
mm,
Good.
no, I'm not
I was
hearing
trying to turn
anything.
them off, but
Yeah. Well, so tell me a little bit about yourself. I'd love to know just sort of the origins of Billy Ivey.
yeah. Well, I don't. I mean, I could start from the very beginning, but I don't think we have enough time. I'm a lot older than you think I am, probably. But I grew up in Nashville, just outside of Nashville, in Franklin, Tennessee, which these days is a really really cool, like very desirable place to be. And it's always been pretty quaint. Like downtown Franklin's always been pretty quaint, but it was also uh, way out in the sticks, 30, 40, well, really 40 years ago. Um, I went to school in Brentwood, which was about 10 or 12 miles from where I lived. I would say 10 or 12 miles. But it seemed a lot further than that because Franklin wasn't what it is today back then. I mean, it was the country. And so I kind of grew up. I say I grew up on a farm. It was not a working farm. We had a horse, but we had 8 acres, in the back in our backyard essentially. But I grew up on a farm. I'm a farmer. Um,
Just working the land, tilling
yeah,
the
just
tilling, tending to the animals, tilling the
yeah.
farm.
None of that. But grew up in Nashville and had a pretty idyllic childhood. I mean, to be honest, it was a pretty great childhood. My father passed away when I was 15, which kind of shook things up a little bit. Um, but my family stayed very, very, very close, and I think a lot of who I am potentially with my own kids probably is a reflection of, or maybe just a reverberation of, what I had with my dad, and what I missed from my dad, all those years after he passed away. But yeah, I mean, I don't. This isn't a Billy as a dad podcast, but that really did mark a lot of my decisions growing up. A lot of my path was sort of dictated by circumstances at home, and what we were doing. And I think I always wanted to make my dad proud. Even after he was gone, he was in marketing. He was a pretty successful businessman, business owner in marketing. So it was always sort of something that I wanted to get into. So I left Nashville, went to Samford here in Birmingham for college, and realized pretty quickly that I wasn't a businessman. I love to write. I love to be creative. I love to tell stories. And so I became an English major, thinking that's the only thing you can do when you like to write. Um, and so I was an English major in college, and realized very quickly that I didn't really like to read, which you have to do a lot of as an English major. But it was always very tough for me to focus and read a lot of books. But I was an English major, marketing minor, and then decided I can't be a teacher. But I think you also have to read a lot as a teacher, maybe. But I also didn't want to be a teacher, and so what else do you do? I mean, I'm not smart enough to go to law school. I don't know what to do with an English degree, and so I just got into advertising, and started writing as a junior copywriter at a small agency here in Birmingham, and then sort of moved all over the southeast with my family in tow, and which led us all the way back to Birmingham. I think about my wife and I have moved 13 times in 24 years.
Wow.
Um, yeah, yeah, poor thing, poor thing. What a
In
what a
so many
saint.
ways.
She is. Yeah, that's right. She is a saintly woman, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where else you want to go from that, but that's sort of where I started and how I kind of ended up back in Birmingham.
Tell me this, what sort of job title or label do you give yourself now, especially in the world of advertising or creative in general?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because I don't really have one. I I always wanted to be a senior copywriter. Like when I started out, it's like, God, if I could just be a senior copywriter, because you start out as a copywriter, and then you jump up, to a junior copywriter, and then eventually a few years later you might become a senior copywriter, and then I don't know what they call you other than creative director. The last agency job I had, and again, I'm a writer. I don't do a whole lot more than that, or at least I didn't at the time. All I had done was writing. Um, but they gave me the title of brand strategist. And Brian, I still don't know what that means. I genuinely don't know what it means. I was a brand strategist for 7 years, and I don't know what that means. I think I kind of joked, while I was there, I joked that I think that's just what they call the oldest writer in the room. And I have for the past decade been the oldest writer in the room in most places, in most creative rooms that I'm in. And so I was a brand strategist, and I think there are some brand strategists who are very analytical, and they talk about market economy and all the different kinds of things that come with strategy. I'm not that guy. I never have been. I never really wanted to be. I think creative strategy is fascinating. When to say what, and where to say what, and how to say what. How do you help people define their ethos, or whatever you want to call it, their why, if you will. But that's fascinating to me, and that's what I dug my heels into when I was at the last agency I was with, is more of a creative strategist, senior copywriter. And when I left the agency to kind of do my own thing, I kind of refer to myself as a creative director, um, because I'm doing all sorts of cool stuff that doesn't really fall into a writing path, or a strategy path, or even, I mean, I sometimes am a director on video shoots, and I don't really know what to call myself anymore, other than just a creative director. I think that's where I fit.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he does video work, has a video production company, and this is somebody that I don't think you know. His name's Colin, but anyway, Colin and I were talking, and I was describing you to him, and I described you as an ideas guy. I
Hmm.
said, or visionary. And I know that that may be a little bit loftier of a
Yes.
title than you prefer, but
Hey, I like it. I think it's fantastic.
because what I've seen from you in a couple of different situations is this ability to find a story, the ability to envision the narrative and really sort of like the message, um,
Yeah.
and I think sort of bring that together with the people that are responsible for the visuals.
Mm,
So I, that's just from I don't really know what you would title that other than
yeah.
just it's somebody in my situation. So I consider myself just more of a videographer, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes I've been at a shoot where I'm responsible for pretty much everything. I mean, I'm doing lighting, I'm operating the camera, I'm interviewing the person, or I'm directing people that are talents on the in the video. Um, and oftentimes I find myself wishing I had somebody that would tell me what in the world I need to do. Because or at least be able to like tie it all together, because
Yeah.
most of the time I feel like I'm just grasping at straws, and then whenever I get into the editing I'm like, well, now it's time to actually find out what the story was. And I
Yeah.
feel like you are one of those people that sort of can in some ways, like even in pre-production, be able to, all right, let's build this narrative, or even somebody on set that's able to find the story through dialogue or through interview, or through even like whatever's happening in the moment.
Yeah.
Tell me where I'm wrong in that, or where I've hit the nail on the head with some of that.
Well, I think that's true, and um, I don't, not in a braggadocious way, but for somewhere along the line, I just got really good at hearing people, and even maybe even when they weren't talking, but understanding sort of the motive, or the opportunity to sort of dig a little bit deeper. And I don't know where that comes from. It's not something that I've read a lot about, or practiced a ton. I would attribute it to all of the different creative roles that I have played, and sort of seeing things from. I mean, I've even been on the client side from time to time, and being on the client side, which is awful. It, I just, it's just to me, it's a lot of strict. It's a stricter sort of discipline to be on the client side. When you're on the agency side, you get to kind of try stuff. And back to your point though, I kind of feel like I get lucky a lot, and because not everything is great, not everything is even good all the time, but I feel like I get lucky a lot, or at least I feel that way, right? Sometimes I'll look back on some work that was done in collaboration with other people, and you go, "Golly, that was pretty good." I didn't even know it was going to be that good, but it ended up being good. And so I don't necessarily give myself credit for that. I think it's just being an observant, and having a perspective, that from a bunch of different perspectives, as much and as awful as changing jobs, 160 times over the past 25 years is, and has been, and can be, on relationships and whatnot. I think it's given me a pretty good perspective. I've been able to see from a bunch of different angles how other people think. And then, like I said, the last agency, I was kind of in charge of, when new clients would come in, or a new project would come in, sort of being the initial guy to ask all the questions, to stand in there and do the song and dance of, what's your promise? what do you really believe in? What are three words that describe who you are and why? And then sort of really digging deep, almost from a psychological level, of trying to understand exactly how you talk, what you say, and why it matters to who you want to be. And so I did that for years, and it really made me a lot more disciplined in being able to listen. And and that's really my favorite part. That the act of writing is not necessarily that fun. It's not a whole lot of fun to sit down in front of a blank screen. It's a super fun to have conversations and to hear perspectives and to sort of put yourself in other people's shoes. And I think that I don't know if I'm uniquely gifted at doing that, but it's certainly something that I love to do, and I have found some success in helping other people tell their stories.
It
So
sounds like
God,
to
that's
me. Do what?
that's just a really long answer that probably didn't even address the question, but
No, I think it
here we
did.
are.
But what I'm hearing from you is one key thing is that you've learned over experience, like what questions to ask first and
Mm,
foremost. And then I
yeah,
think from that, like you even said, you listen, and probably your own natural interest and curiosity sort of carries you deeper into questioning and deeper into listening.
yeah,
And I think, like you said, the jobs you've had probably has helped you learn how to, okay, I've learned all this about this person. Now, what are we going to do with it? Or I've
yeah.
learned all this about this need this company has. What are we going to do with it? And
That's
so,
right. And I think that something I'm going to attribute this to somebody else, but I don't know that he actually ever said this, but it's what I sort of surmised or understood from one of my creative mentors, creative heroes, really. And he just said, what other people have to say is a lot more important than what you think they need to say. And I think it took me a long time to learn that, because as a creative, right? I mean, we really need that pat on the back. We really need, for people to recognize our brilliance and look how creative I am, right? That's the funniest headline in the history of the world. Um, but if it doesn't work and it doesn't speak the language that they need to be speaking, then it's not effective. And it takes a long time for you to sort of put your pride aside, for you to be humble enough to sit back and say what you have to say is really important. Now, I have the gift of words, and I can help you put those words together and string together a sentence or a paragraph or whatever it may be. But this is not my story, and even from an advertising campaign, this is not my story. My experience with this motor oil should not lead us to the answer. It should be why. There's so many different components that go into telling an appropriate and a powerful story, and most of them aren't the ones that are actually created or manifested by the creator. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, the story that doesn't meet the need, although maybe a great story, ultimately isn't. Well, I don't know why I just got a thumbs up on my on my screen. Did you see that?
I still see it, and for some reason, oh, I think you're. Did it
Yeah,
do it
I
for
think
me just
so.
now?
I think evidently I've turned that feature on
I thought you just liked
unintentionally.
what I said. I was like, oh, thanks.
No, but I think again, a great story, no matter how great it is, that doesn't really meet its purpose is sort of pointless.
Yeah,
In at least in that moment, and especially considering if a client's actually paying you for it.
that's right. That's exactly right. I I mean, sometimes you do things just because you got to pay the power bill, right? You have to sort of concede sometimes, but often, I mean, and there's several different things that I've sort of keep coming up in my mind that I want to talk about, but um, I think that often the best work, the best work that I feel like I've done, except I mean, let's just put it in the advertising world. I've done things outside of that world too, but some of the best work that I've ever done is work that when you look at it collectively as a team or as a creative entity, right? And you can't remember who actually wrote that headline, or you can't remember who actually came up with that idea. It's a collaborative effort, And when things are working and they're sort of moving on all cylinders, it doesn't really matter. It's like, oh, we figured it out. We heard that together, and we figured that out. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who got the headline and who, this kind of leads into what I'm going to say a second ago is I used to, and this is why I say I think I've matured and learned this over time, the humility and whatever that means. But man, it used to be my number one goal to win awards. I wanted to win awards, man. And when I was 30 and I was working at a agency called Brains on Fire in Greenville, South Carolina. Great organization. I love the agency. But man, my whole goal, everything I did, it was to try to win an award. And I won some little ones, like some regional Addies and local Addies or whatever. And I want to say at some point I won an Effie award, which evidently was a big deal, but I still don't know what it means, and I certainly didn't get the trophy. But like I won a gold Effie award. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it is. And I think it was like that experience in winning this thing and being celebrated for winning an Effie. EFFIE, I think is what it is. I think. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Sounds like you won an F award.
Yeah, I did. I've won several Effing awards, but this Effie award, I mean, it was like people were celebrating, and I got emails from people saying, "Congratulations, you just won a gold Effie award," and I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that is. I didn't apply. I certainly didn't. I didn't submit anything that I worked on it, and it just kind of hit me like, who cares? I don't even care. What I care about is what I then started to care about is did it work? You know, did it make a difference? Did it actually sort of solve a problem? Did it give somebody a perspective that they didn't have before I was able to inject my creativity into it? If not, who effing cares, right? Like it doesn't matter. And gosh, my goal was to win a gold pencil, at the One Show Awards. I just wanted a gold pencil so bad. And I knew people who had won a gold pencil. I was like, I'm better than that guy. I can write better than that guy. I'm more creative. I'm funnier than that guy. But what that guy did was he probably solved a problem for a client that then got some traction, got something to notice. So back to what I was going to say about award shows. Um, I think they're fine and they're good, and it's a worthy thing to sort of strive for, but not for the wrong reasons, right? I think if you're trying to do award winning work for the client, for somebody, and try to bring attention to them, that's great. That's humility. That's like I want to serve you, and I think that the other way, self-serving creative. Again, we desire feedback. I desire positive remarks on stuff that I do, but that can't be your drive. And if it is, then I think you need to take a deep breath and understand that there's a bigger goal at hand. They don't have a category, not to my knowledge, in the Addies for campaigns that work. It's a beauty show. It's a beauty pageant.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's really sexy, or that's really out there, or that's really weird. We need to give them an award because it's super weird. But did it work? I worked on a campaign at the last agency that I thought was brilliant work, and it was not just my work; it was our work, right? And I thought it was the most engaging, beautiful stuff that I felt like I had been a part of up to date, and it didn't win any awards. And it was kind of like, golly, what do you want from me? What am I supposed to do? That's the best work I've ever done with a team. Um, and a guy reminded me, he said, do you know that the client saw a 400% increase in investments or blah, 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 whatever, because of that work? And it kind of gives you chills even sitting here right now. It's like, oh, it worked. It did what it was supposed to do. I was able to tell an effective story. It didn't win an award. It didn't win the swimsuit competition on Thursday night at the venue. But again, I can get off on tangents sometimes and I get super excited about it, because I do think that there's the motive behind what you're doing is super important. And And if you can do something for the right reasons, even these small things, right, it can make a really big difference. It not necessarily in the ways that we strive for when we're young and want the attention and want the awards. Um, I just really want to do good work. I want to tell really powerful stories, and I get to do that in a bunch of different ways, like you mentioned.
The whole time I'm listening to you, I'm thinking two things. First of all, I'm thinking every bit of it, like this is great stuff, like great information and a great story in general from you. And then the other thing I'm thinking is I'm way
He's
out
full
of
of
my
crap.
league. No, 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 no. I'm thinking I'm way out of my league in this interview because I have like to be honest, man, I've been most nervous over this interview than any of the other ones I've done so far. And there's
Well,
one that
because
I in part because I do think first of all I think you're a great storyteller and probably a great interviewer. I've never been with you on set when you're interviewing, but I can imagine. And so then I think how bad am I going to do at this? That's one question I have. But then the other thing is like I want to be able to to touch on all that you are doing and or have done and and I'm afraid I'm going to end up messing that up because I just got through literally this morning. My daughters, I was trying to get them. They wanted to go to school late today. I don't know if your kids ever want to try to avoid school.
that's weird.
You've got all like A+ students. I would imagine at home. So
Okay.
yeah. But anyway, while they were getting ready and I was trying to shoo them out the door, I watched the story of napkinisms. And that whole, like, I really just want to play like all of your videos that are about the stuff you've done. That's what I want to do. I mean, you have such great stories and
Hmm.
great just things that you've been a part of. So, all that to say, that was really my only way to segue into the
No, it's
next
great.
slide.
Yeah,
So,
just tell me to shut up every once in a while.
no,
It'd be
no,
great.
well, we've already done this. This is just tell me about your journey. I really just want to give you a chance to defend at least two of these photos, and then we can move on to the next slide if you feel like you need to defend these.
Yeah, I know that the bottom picture with the blue thing on my head was probably taken at around 6:30 in the morning. It was probably about 28 degrees and raining ice as I was sitting on a boat with my son at a fishing tournament. I know for a fact that that's when that picture was taken. It was miserable, and
No, 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 that's beautiful.
I wanted to be everywhere else.
I like that phrase. I wanted to be
Yeah.
everywhere else.
um, yeah, that top picture. I think that was taken at the last age. So that's an older picture. I was skinnier and not near as much white here, but and then I don't know what the next one is. I don't know what I'm doing there. It doesn't look like I was doing kind things.
I think you
Um,
were just waking up one of your children, weren't you?
maybe I don't know. I don't
That's what
know.
I look like in the morning. Get out of bed. All
I'd read,
right.
yeah,
Well, I want to hear about the work that you're doing because I know right now you're currently, and we've talked a lot about sort of like your journey up till now, the kind of work
yeah,
you've been doing. But I want to hear what you're doing currently. I know and I don't know if you had authored books before, but I think The Sea Between Us was one that relatively recently came out. I guess maybe
yeah.
about a year or two ago, maybe a year ago.
Yeah, almost 2 years ago, August 2022 is when that
And then
came out.
Long is the Way is just relatively recently came out. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
end of last year. So it's been out maybe I don't know, 6 months. When's October to now is I don't know 6 or 8 months. Yeah, yeah. So it's relatively new for sure.
And then you've
Um,
got Small Stories, which is your
mhm.
latest stuff. If you don't mind, just sort of run us through some of
Yeah,
that stuff, and just let us know what you're doing.
yeah. I'd love to do that. So um, after 25 years in advertising and doing all the things and sort of working your way up to try to be whatever get the next title or whatever it may be. Um, you begin to start thinking, can I do this on my own? Can I do this, by myself? Can I sort of venture into new and different things? It was around about that time that I was having these questions of what am I going to be? I was probably 47, right? And gosh, you know, I'm about to be 50, so I'm going to die soon. This sort of thought. Like,
What am I going to be when I grow up?
yeah, I only have a couple of years left, and who's going to hire a 50-year-old? Like, so it was. I just going through a bunch of different questions and anxiety. Really, I mean, anxiety is probably too strong of a word for what I was going through, but just questioning a lot of things. It was around that time that I got a call from some friends in Nashville, the Frist family, and Chet and Mary Virginia Frist are dear friends of mine. They have been for a long time, but they called me and they said, "Hey, man, have you ever thought about writing a book?" And, of course I have. I'm a writer. That's what writers do. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to write a book. I've never written one before. And they said, well, we have a great story we want you to hear. Um, and so I heard it. I listened, and it was the story of Yoseli Perea, who is the main character, the character that I see between us is about. And it was just fascinating. I fell madly, deeply, instantly in love with that guy as soon as I met him and really got to hear some of what he had gone through in his story. And it was really fascinating. And so I kind of agreed to tell his story without knowing what in the world we were going to do or how we were going to do it. Again, it's a process that I hadn't been through. I think I've been through just about every other creative process except for actually writing a book, or authoring a book, I should say. And so I just got to writing. I interviewed him a lot. I had 14 hours of interview footage where Chet and Mary Virginia in Nashville had interviewed he and his wife, and I just watched that over and over and over again. And I just decided to tell his story. About 6 months into telling his story, I realized that I couldn't work my agency job and write this book, and it was super important for me to write this book. I was invested. And I thought, well, I can write this book and I can start picking up freelance projects on the side so that I can just really focus on this. And so it was kind of it's probably a dumb decision. It probably was. I wouldn't call it brave. It was more leap before you look. So it was kind of stupid. But I left the agency and started writing this book and picking up some freelance projects every once in a while. Anyway, it took me about a year and a half, almost a year and a half, to finish with telling Yoseli's story. And that is, late nights at the table, weekends away, sitting at the kitchen table or whatever on late nights. And I finished it. I was super proud of it, and had gotten in touch with an agent, for lack of a better description, an agent who helped me shop the story around. And somebody bought it. They were like, we love this story. We think this is fantastic. We want to publish your book. And it was Tyndale. Tyndale is a Christian publisher, and I was like, okay, well, that's cool. You want to pay money for this book? That'd be really cool. That'd be great. But what I realized is I did it backwards. I did it completely backwards, because what you do when you're writing a book is you sell the idea of the book, and you say, give me money and I'll finish it out. I'll write the rest of the book. At least that's the traditional way of doing it. So they bought the book based off of two paragraphs that I sent with the proposal. Just as an example of the writing, they bought the whole book by those two paragraphs. They bought it, they sent a check got cashed, and then they read the book, and they went, "Yeah, we got to change this book. Like this is we, oh, it's that story." And that was such a fascinating learning experience, because we celebrated as soon as Tyndale says, "Yeah, we want to publish your book." I'm done, right? I thought I was done. This is done. I'm going to be a famous author. But then the real work began, and it took about 2 years. 2 years to get the book to its final form, which I'm super proud of. But it was not what I wrote originally. It's not what they bought originally, and so that process it wore me out. It absolutely. I didn't care at the end of it, like when the book was going to come out. I didn't care how many it was going to sell. I just wanted it to be over, until it came out, and I saw people start to really absorb it and be moved by his story, and then it kind of lit another fire for me to keep doing that. Couple of
What
years
kind of
passed.
what
Yeah,
what
go ahead.
was the what was the I guess big issue that they had with the original story? Like, what was the disconnect between what you had written and what they were wanting? And I don't know if you need to get into all the details. Feel free to not
No, but
like
it was
share what you
fascinating.
can.
It was fascinating. I ended up. This is gonna anybody who writes or anybody who puts words on paper will probably throw up a little bit in their mouth when I say this, because I had to delete or put aside 74,000 words that I had written, and that's a lot of words. That's almost a book. That's almost a full length book, right? I had to, and I didn't have to. I mean, I could have pushed back and I could have said no and and we sent them their check back and said no, that I'm sticking to my laurels and we're going to do what we want to do. But I was terrified to do that. It'd been way too much investment in this. What happened was that we sold it. It's the story of Yoseli Perea and his journey to escape communist Cuba, and that is the story that was written. But I wrote the book from two perspectives. I wrote it from his perspective and from his wife's perspective, because so it was like altering chapters, right? It was Yoseli's perspective and his experience through this part of his life, and then it would jump to her perspective, her experience at this point of life, and then they sort of meet up after he escapes Cuba. Their stories meet up, and then it's told from one perspective. They thought that readers would be confused by that. They thought that readers would not fully understand that. And I don't necessarily disagree. I was probably overreaching a little bit from a trying to be super creative and tell these intertwining stories. It was probably a little bit adventurous and too far, but I still think there's value in her side of the story. And that's what they didn't realize when I sent them the proposal with the sample writing. It was this, and then they get into it and say, oh wait, there's another main character. I don't, and they just thought that it would be best to not put that in there. I'm really proud of the end product. I love it, and
Yeah,
it's probably what it needed to be. But the process, golly, it was excruciating.
it sounds like it.
It was not fun. And there's just it puts in a lot of self doubt. Should I really be doing this? Am I any good at this? I should have stuck with the agency. It just
Yeah.
makes you question just about every decision you make when somebody pushes back for no real apparent reason. I mean, if there's a logical reason for why we can't do this, then I can get behind that. But when it's like, no, just change it because I said so, that's tough.
Will you ever release the? I'd call that almost like the director's cut.
Well, it's that's an interesting question, because I think there's a lot of people who are kind of thirsty for her side of the story or thirsty for her perspective. I don't think that I would put out a book, a See Between Us Part Two, but there are probably some pretty interesting avenues. There's different ways, mechanisms, if you will, that we could get her side of the story out there. Um, yeah, I mean, I've thought about it, but I haven't thought about it enough to actually put pen to paper and make it happen. Um,
Yeah.
but I do have 74,000 words sitting somewhere on the desktop that they're just waiting to be read. And it could be a cool thing to put out in a whether it be a podcast or whether it be put, on a blog or whatever you may call it. But anyway, that experience was enough for me to realize that I didn't want to write books anymore.
Wait a minute. Hang on now.
I
If we
know.
look, that can't be the case because we have another book, right?
It was the case. Um, but a friend of mine, Greg Nixon, a buddy of mine from college, he called me out of the blue one day and said, "Hey, we need to go to lunch." And we went to lunch, and he started the conversation by saying, "I read your book this weekend," and I made the stupid dad joke, or whatever. "Oh, you're the one, right?" So, "Oh yeah,"
Right.
and
Right.
he's like, "No, I read your book this weekend, and it was beautiful." And then he just made me sit in that for a second. He said, "It's remarkable." And he goes, "I'm not just saying it because you wrote it. I'm not just saying it because I'm surprised that you were able to do this, but it was authentic and beautiful. And what I didn't see, Billy, what I didn't see in this book was you. I saw Yoseli. But I didn't see in this book somebody who wanted to tell somebody's story. I saw his story, and I didn't see you in it." And he goes, "I don't know if you're offended by that or if you want to be." I said, "No," I said, "That's the greatest compliment you can get, is somebody who's trying to tell somebody else's story." It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Brian, right? It's like my perspective on what you should not overwhelm or overpower what needs to be said, even with a brand. Just because I experience this brand in one way doesn't mean that my opinion is more important than theirs. And I think that kind of bled over. It was such a powerful statement for him to say, it's perfect because it's not your story, but you were able to perfectly recount his story because you listen. And I'm got chills all over my body. I'm about to, get emotional because I'm sitting here, wallowing in the fact that I've sold 9 books, and 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 it was hard, and it was 2.5 years and whatever. Um, and then he said something that was kind of jarring. He said, "For 5 years, I feel like God's been telling me to tell Alton Hardy's story. But after reading your book, I know now that you're supposed to write it." And that's a you kind of sit back and go, God said what now? you know? And
The burning bush told
yeah,
him to,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
I mean, it's kind of that sort of feeling, and I was like, I said, okay, I've heard of this guy, and in fact, I think I remember him speaking at church like 11 years ago, like something ridiculous. I remember his name. I know, and he's a hard person to forget. Alton is like a 6'6", 280 pound African American guy with a big white beard. Like, it's kind of hard to forget him. Um, but I didn't know his story, and I literally said, well, why Alton's story? Like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, Alton is one of 12 children born to sharecroppers in the shadow of the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. That intro alone, I went, "Yep, I'm gonna write that story." You know what I mean? It didn't take me. I mean, it was a knee jerk. He said, "One of 12 children born to sharecroppers in the shadow of the Edmund Pettus Bridge." Like, that's a beautiful statement in and of itself.
right.
Um, and it just grabbed a hold of me, like the idea of being able to be a part of that. I didn't even know what his story was. All I knew that he now lives in Birmingham. He's a preacher, but I didn't have any idea what his story was. And Greg was very, very encouraging to me, and continues to be very encouraging to me. You need to be doing this. This is what you're supposed to be doing. You're so good at telling other people's stories. You should start. You should don't publish this. Don't go through the misery of publishing companies again. Tell the story the way that you think it needs to be told. You've been doing this for 25 years. Now it's time to put pen to paper. And I started writing Alton's story. I started meeting with Alton. We went to Selma. We went to Sardis, Alabama, which is right next to Selma. It's a nothing place right next to Selma. And Alton is a few years older than I am, but really grew up in the heat at the heart of the civil rights movement. And so what happened in Selma was literally happening in his backyard when he was a 10-year-old, or as he was I'm sorry, when he was born. And he grew up with the repercussions of all of what was happening in Selma and elsewhere. But we went to Selma a week later. Alton and I, it's the first time I've ever spent any time with him. This huge dude, is driving his car, and I'm sitting in his passenger seat, and we both were just weeping as he was telling his story. And I'm not a huge crier. I'm actually becoming a pretty big crier for some reason. I don't know why, but
I
um,
can relate to that. I think it's
uh,
something about the older we get and the more we become reflective of life in general. I'm right there with you. Can I
yeah,
can I
it's
ask you one question? Just sort of, I want
yeah.
to
Come on,
continue with the story because I want to hear more about this, and especially more about how this has led to small stories.
yeah,
Um, but I want to know a little bit of your process. I took out a slide that I usually put in here. There it goes again.
yeah.
I got to turn that thing off.
What
But
would happen if you were shooting me the bird? I want to see that. I want to see what comes
we'll
out.
try that. We'll try that after I stop recording. Um,
Okay. Oh, we're recording this. I didn't know we
yeah.
were recording this.
Um, but I have a slide usually I put in here talking about let's talk gear, right? And from what I can tell, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not a camera person. Like you don't.
This is my gear. This is basically my gear. So yeah, I'm glad you took that slide out. Yeah.
But I do want to know, like, technically speaking, how are you capturing somebody's story? Are you recording audio? Do you just simply write it down? Is it all kept in your head? Especially whenever it comes to like quotes, I can imagine
Yeah.
you write those down, but at the same time, do you take maybe your phone and just do audio recording, or do you do something else?
Yeah, I do. I have, I don't know how many hours of conversation recorded just on my phone. I mean, literally, I've got the very first conversations that Alton and I had, and you can. It's really fascinating. I wish the quality was better because it would be interesting for people to hear. You know, I think it would be really, really interesting. At least people who read the book would love to hear what those first conversations sounded like. It's usually muffled or messed up or scratchy, kind of in my pocket type recordings of what's going on. But yeah, I do that as a backup to what I'm either writing down or just absorbing. Um, there's there's I've been really lucky because Yoseli and Alton gave me a lot of freedom to um, sort of relay my understanding of their stories. They are true. They are true. The details are true. I didn't make anything up. You know, I didn't make up any circumstances or certainly any dates or anything like that. But um, again, I think it's just being a good listener and when somebody's telling you a really powerful story, it's kind of hard to forget, you know, that, and then you can kind of go back and you can ask details and ask to fill in the blanks, but the process is pretty boring. I mean, it really is just, um, especially when we're moving, right? When we're moving and walking and talking or whatever, it's just listening. But the next 6 months after that trip to Selma, Alton and I got together every Wednesday morning from 8 to 10 a.m. at Edgar's Bakery over in Hoover. Um, and we would
So
just sit
that's
there.
where everyone needs to show up,
That's
right? For your next interview. We're just
that's
going to
right.
all watch you behind the newspapers.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome to. Just bring a better audio recording device because my
I
phone sucks
got
at
you,
it.
man. I
You
got you.
know? But I did. I wrote. I mean, I write. I try to write things out, or even type it out. I write faster than I type. I type with like this. I really do. I've been a writer for almost 30 years, and I do, but I'm super fast at it. I'm as
I
fast
believe
doing
it.
that as a lot of people are with the QWERTYUIOP.
That's
Um,
what I use. The home keys, man. Home keys all day.
I got a D in typing in high school. I did.
You just broke the D off the keyboard after that, didn't you? Like, I'm
That's
taking this with me.
right. um, yeah, I mean, I appreciate the question. You know, process. It kind of is different, and I can kind of take elements of what I do in marketing and branding stuff, storytelling that way, in the long form writing, whether it be books or whatever. I kind of take the same elements, and it's there's always a discovery phase. There's always a discovery phase, and I think that's really really important to my ability to do what I do. There's whether it be a discovery, like I said earlier, the dog and pony show, when you get up and you're asking the questions, we are, we will, because fill in the blanks, and you get all these different things, and that's a fascinating exercise. I'd love to tell you more about that too if we get into the branding side of things. But when you're able to hear people's stories from different perspectives and get different people in the room, there's always a discovery phase. And so the discovery phase for this book with Alton was 6 months of meeting at Edgar's from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Sometimes it would go longer, but and just listening, asking questions. You know, and he would sometimes be kind of guarded with what, because it's really it's a tough read. I think it's some of my best work just collectively as far as the actual flow and the narrative and the word choice and all that kind of thing. I think it's really well done. I'm proud of it. Um, but it's tough. It's a tough read. There's a lot of dark things there that you can probably imagine. But So he was guarded in a lot of ways. There is an art to getting somebody to just rest and trust you. And so in the discovery phase, when you're able to discover the right ways and by asking the right questions, people begin to trust you and they start to understand that, oh, they get me and they really want to hear from me. And at the end of the day, as is represented by me talking so much in this podcast, people really like to hear themselves talk. You know, if at the, I mean, people really do like the sound of their own voice, and they like to sort of express themselves. And when you're in a situation where you can trust somebody, it's easier to talk. It's easier to feel sort of unhindered by judgment or whatever. One of my favorite quotes of all time is, in order to inspire another. Hold on. To inspire, yeah, it's my favorite. It's great.
I
But
quote it every day.
to inspire another person requires only a willingness to share your story. To inspire another person requires only a willingness to share your story. What that means is, what it doesn't say is, in order to inspire another person, you got to tell them your story. It's that willingness. It's the willingness to do that. It's being vulnerable and opening yourself up, and that's not easy to do for everybody or with everybody. So that discovery phase is super important to let people know that I'm asking these questions because I truly care. I'm asking these questions because I need to know selfishly. I need to know in order to do my job, but also I want to serve you well. I want to be true, in what I'm saying, because I can't trust myself to tell your story because it's not my story. I can't trust myself to be the voice for your brand because it's not my brand. I mean, but I can articulate your story for you because that's how God's gifted me, creatively. But you can't do that just because you're a good writer. There's a lot of really good writers who do terrible work because they don't listen, because they think their idea is better than others. And when people can't trust you, they're not going to tell you the true story. Um, so
I,
the process is discovery, building that trust, recording, whatever way that may be, recording whatever that is, and then resting in it for a little bit. I don't ever promise anybody something the next day, because it takes me a minute to wrap my head around stuff. And again, sometimes my word choice is not right. Sometimes I'm not coming from an authentic or true or service oriented place. I'm trying to just get the job done. I'm trying to just be funny. I'm trying to be just creative, or poignant, or whatever it may be. But when you can kind of take yourself out of it a little bit and just trust yourself, and allow others to trust you, I think that's when the really, really powerful stories come together.
one thing that one thing that I realize about myself sometimes whenever it comes to listening to others and especially other people's stories is I oftentimes like to interject, I guess, ways in which I can relate to their story.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's like story upon story. And I can imagine um, that could make your process take like 10 times longer because of the fact that it's almost like these tangents. How do you, whenever you're sitting down with somebody, especially so many different times over such a long period of time, how do you keep it on track, or are you sharing your own stories at times? Like, is there this back and forth of storytelling, or is it just simply you speak, I listen, I question or prompt, and then we go on to the next? I'm curious
Yeah,
as to how that back and forth is with you.
yeah. It was different with Yoselli than it was with Alton. Yoselli, first of all, there's a language barrier there. Like he's not a real conversationalist. You know, hey, tell me about escaping on the boat. Yes, we did. We escaped.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, cool. Was the water cold? Yes. All right, all right. So those conversations would go really long. So I would have to explain to him, what I'm trying to get you to say is how the water
That's
made you
tough.
feel, how it made you feel. How did you experience leaving your family? Talk to me about that. Oh yes, it was sad. Okay, it was sad. Got it. I'll write that down. So it
And
took a
now
long
you got
time.
to write like paragraphs about how it was
Yeah,
sad.
that's right. That's right. 3 pages of, yes, we got on a boat. Okay, all right. So then you start making up things in your head, and you start putting yourself in the. But the beauty of that is, I was able to experience the places where I knew a lot of these took place. Bethany and I went to Cuba and spent a week in Cuba with Yoseli and and a couple of others, and he got to take us to all the places that I then got to write about. And so it wasn't me making up the surroundings. It wasn't me. It was me using my own experience with him to tell his story. Anyway, that's not the question you asked. The with Alton, like I said, he was guarded in a lot of ways, and so sometimes I would have to sort of prompt him with, so if I were answering this question, I would immediately think of my father. If I were answering this question, I would think about Bethany. If somebody asked me that question, it would be really hard for me to answer it because I love all my kids, or whatever it may be. So there are some prompts that you sort of build in, and I think, again, to inspire another person requires only a willingness to share your story. Being willing to say me too, but not being overpowering with the me too. Like, have you ever seen that Brian Regan comedy? Brian Regan is comic.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, he talks about the me monster. He's got this bit at the end of one of his specials. It's the funniest thing in the world. You can add a link to it in the notes or whatever, because it's absolutely hilarious. Me monster, where there's nothing worse than when you're telling a story and somebody is like trying to finish it before you're going, me too. Me too. Yeah, me too. I've got a better story. So you try to one up each other's story. That's what we are all sort of inclined to do, is to one up your story. If you say, if you say, my back hurts, or you think your back hurts, my back, so it's taking yourself out of the story is a powerful tool, but being willing to share your part of the story is I think where the good stuff happens. It's never comparing your story to somebody else's because yours is better, or you're trying to get something out of them that's not true, but being willing to share parts of your story with other people in order to get them comfortable to trust you and to give you what you want. That's a powerful tool, and I don't know if that's learned or if it's just um, it is learned. It's certainly learned. It's not because I'm not also a me monster. I certainly am. I love to hear myself talk, um, and but we all battle with that.
Well, I think that's what I was almost referencing is that idea of the me monster, and I'm definitely guilty of that myself. And so that's what I was thinking, like, man, if my whole, I mean, especially the amount of time that you invested in this, and that they're investing in this, I can
Mm,
imagine if that me monster idea gets a little too carried away, if you don't rein that in and
yeah,
make it intentional and purposeful, then it can definitely lead to just sort of a waste of time at times,
yeah, for sure.
and just sort of stretch a process that shouldn't take as long.
Yeah.
But that's cool. I like the idea of being able to look at it in a from a comedic point of view, but then I think it perfectly tied in with what you're saying. So I'll definitely try to find that video and link it
Oh, yeah,
below.
it's my favorite. It's absolutely hilarious. It's
All right.
it's
Well,
absolutely hilarious.
we've mentioned it already a couple of times, but I do want to pay respect to Small Stories Studio,
Mm,
uh, and I'd love to hear sort of the transition. How did it go from, here you are now? First of all, you did write the book and you did publish it, the one about
yeah,
that
about
the
Alton.
guy,
Yeah,
yeah, Alton.
yeah.
What how did, and maybe I've got the order wrong, but at what point does Small Story Studio come into play, and what is Small Story Studio?
Well, it came into play sort of through the process of writing Alton's book. I mentioned my friend Greg Mixon. Uh, for lack of a better description, he and several others helped fund Alton's story. So they were investors in Alton's story, but they were also super encouraging in saying, what, this doesn't end with Alton's story. You're a storyteller. You have an opportunity to really really impact people by what you've been gifted to do, and you need to start your own business. You really need to start your own publishing firm, because how hard can it be, right? How hard can it be to publish a book? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, it's easy for you to say because you're not the one doing it, but it was a learning process to figure that out. And frankly, Brian, it's not that hard. It's really not that hard to publish a book. I mean, there are so many different platforms and avenues in different ways, and Amazon makes it so easy. All you have to do is upload a file and it's done, right? Print on
Right.
demand and all these things. So
Right.
so small stories. I mean, we knew that we didn't want to go with the traditional publisher with Alton's story. Just from a content perspective, I did not want to go through the process of editing. I mean, and it wasn't not editing. We did hire an editor to help with this. Becky Philpott was amazing. She really helped bring it home. But I didn't want anybody to come in and censor this book, and to make it any, there's places that are really tough to read. There's language in it that is used that is tough to read. There's also a lot of God in this book. I mean, Alton's a pastor, and it's sort of his journey to finding God and to finding God the Father, and how God the Father sort of has been leading him through this process all the way. And I didn't want somebody to come in and change that, and so again, wanted to be a truth teller, and I wanted this to be an authentic thing. And so we just did a lot of research, or I just did a lot of research to figure out how in the world do you do this? How can we get the book out? My friend Ryan Harrison designed the book cover for me based on an idea that I'd had. There's a sign in Fairfield where Alton lives now that is all dilapidated and falling apart. But it's actually a beautiful sign. It reads, "Welcome to Fairfield, an older city moving in a new direction," and it's just absolutely like falling apart. And so the irony in that sign, is kind of beautiful, And so I took that picture one time. Actually, my friend Eric Chapman took the picture, but Eric took the picture, and I just always loved that photo. And so I sent it to Ryan, and Ryan's like, "Well, that's your book cover, here." And so he was able to design that book cover, and then we just sort of put our heads together and tried to, and laid it out, and put the book out. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. It will be easier the next time we do it, because you learn, and you change, and you shift and pivot and whatnot um, as you're doing this. But then small stories became. It's like I can't I can't sustain a business by writing a book a year. It's a tough thing to do, right? I mean, it's a tough thing to write a book, and there's no telling how long it's going to take you to write a book. And so you can't really sustain a business or support a family even just by writing books, unless you're John Grisham or somebody who just gets paid a ton of money before they even write the thing. It's tough to do. It takes a lot of investment on the front end. So we decided, what if we created a studio, if you will, it's a studio of one right now, but it's a collaborative of many, right? So I'm able to collaborate with all these different brilliant people that I've met along the way over the past 25 years. Some of whom some of whom you've worked with, some of whom you've interviewed, um, to really draw on their expertise to at the end of the day, though, the goal is just to tell powerful stories. There is real power in story. There's real power in that willingness to share. And this is not a Billy show. This is not a way for me to get rich and famous to become, but it is a business model, I think, that can work when you're able to engage with a bunch of people and first of all, educate them and say, "Hey, your story matters. Your story really does matter, even if you don't think it matters." Like there are elements to your story that are powerful, and other people can learn from, and other people can be inspired by. But you got to be willing to tell it, and we want to help you tell that. Like that's what I want to do. And I don't want to just write books. I want to tell it through long form story. I want to tell it through short stories. I want to do it through video, podcasts, all the things, because we all sort of absorb things and sort of digest things differently. But the story is what matters. That's what needs to be true and genuine and real. We're working on a documentary right now on a guy named James Harris, who's a guy putting in a grocery store in Fairfield, Alabama, which is not a particularly safe or happy or thriving city in our city of Birmingham. It's a food desert, and that means that people who live there, there's 10,000 residents who live in Fairfield. They don't have access to healthy food. They have access to food at liquor stores. They have access to food at gas stations. They have access to wings and things, or whatever the fried food restaurant is on the corner next to the interstate. But nobody has access to fresh fruits and vegetables and good food. And that affects a lot of people in a lot of different ways. It not only from a health standpoint, there's all sorts of high blood pressure, diabetes, and all these different things that are affected when you're not eating healthy food. Um, but it also it creates joblessness, poverty, crime. All these different things are affected. Now, that's not the answer. Putting in a grocery store is not going to save everybody's life and change everybody's perspective, but you got to start somewhere. And that's what this guy James is like. He's an ex grocery industry veteran who he was a high executive, and he realized, hey, I'm only serving myself by just working my way up the ladder. I want to serve people, and so he's created this model, this grocery store that they're going to put in Fairfield, which is going to be a really neat thing for the people of Fairfield, but for other people to also see that you don't have to do something grand to do something great, which is one of my favorite things to say. I say it all the time when I talk about napkins and everything else. You don't have to do a big thing to make a big difference. You just got to do something. And I really think that this grocery store, and it's being done in an excellent way. It's not just a ramshackle store that they're throwing some vegetables in and saying, here, eat better. It's a community. It's going to become a community hub and a place where people can not only come congregate, but be proud of, like, this is my store. There's not a grocery store within 6 miles of that place. Think about that. I mean, and 62%. I'm wrong about this. I'm not a numbers guy, but 60% of the people in Fairfield who don't have access to healthy food also don't have access to a vehicle. And so, how are they getting fruits and vegetables? There's a story in the film about an 8-year-old who couldn't identify a strawberry.
Mm.
Like, that can't be real. That can't be. I mean, Fairfield's 18 miles from where I'm sitting right now. There's no way that's real, but it's real. I've seen it. I go there. It's those are our neighbors, and so that's a really big story. But it's a story about a grocery store, right? So Small Story Studio. The whole reason why we named it Small Story Studio is because we're all in a small story. All of us feel like what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is small or insignificant, or it's not going to make a difference, or might not matter to the grand scheme of things, or we're trying to find our way and mark things off the to-do list. What I'm trying to say is that marking things off the to-do list is a big deal. Like, just showing up is a big deal. The fact that somebody said, I want to help food deserts. I want to give people hope through food, through groceries. That sounds like not a very big deal. But tell that to the people in Fairfield. Tell that to the people. Tell that to 8-year-old who's going to be able to eat strawberries whenever she wants. Like that's again, that's what I love so much about stories and storytelling, is that these small things, these small, seemingly insignificant things, can turn out to be the greatest things in the world. And one thing I say with the napkinisms talk, we didn't get into that, but that's a super fun way for me to express myself and for me to sort of share the lessons that I've learned about doing small things. Is that we've convinced ourselves that you have to do world changing things to change the world, and it's just simply not true. You have to do the thing that you feel called to do, and you do it with excellence. And when you do that consistently, that's when things happen. That's when things change. This guy's putting in a grocery store in Fairfield. It's going to make a generational difference for some of those people. But it's just a grocery store. We passed 6 grocery stores to get to our grocery store. You know what I mean? But
Nah,
like,
yeah.
and so it doesn't seem big and significant to us, but I think just stepping into the thing you feel called to do can really, really make a difference. And that's what I love about this. That's what I love about stories, is because we all have one. It's not like I can say, well, you don't get me, or you don't understand me, or you're not interesting because you don't have a story like I do. That's false. We all do. Everybody does. That's how we connect with each other, and that's why people are interesting. I am not an extrovert necessarily. I mean, certainly, I kind of Bethany will say, you just don't like people. It's not true. I love people. I love their stories, but it's exhausting, digging into people's stories all the time to get to the meat of things. Um, I like to sit and rest and think about people's stories um, and apply those things to my own, and I think that's how we grow. I'm not an extrovert. I get energized when I'm able to be in front of a crowd, but it takes me a week to recover, from that because it is exhausting. Some people are energized the other way. It's opposite, but um, at the end of the day, I'm fascinated by story. I'm fascinated by the elements of story. I'm fascinated with learning as much as I can about what makes people tick and why they're there. That's why I think I was good at I'm a good at branding or advertising, and I think that's why some of the stories that I'm able to tell now are going to impact people.
You gave a ton of information there about small stories and this the grocery store in Fairfield. Let me sort of, I guess, mention a couple of things. First of all, I do
Yeah,
want everyone to know, obviously, smallstorystudio.com. I'm assuming, is there a place that this stuff is going to be visible? I mean, I know you've I've seen a lot with Alton's story, but then
yeah.
is there also the Food Desert grocery store? Is that going to be visible in on Small Story Studio? Is it going to be a video series?
It will be. We're working on it now, and so I would say we're about halfway done with where we need to be. We have captured most of what we need to capture. Now the editing process of putting something like that together, because it's a pretty, it's not convoluted, but there's a lot of different things moving in this story. We're telling the story of James, we're telling the story of Food Deserts, we're also telling the story of Carver Jones, which is the name of the grocery store. So how those things intertwine and relate to one another, it's a lot to pack into an 18 20 minute film. So we're still working on that, and we're still also thinking through how do we get eyes on it? How do
Right.
we allow people to see it? There's certainly ways to do that through festivals and entering into some festivals and sort of trying to get a bunch of eyes on it, which would also help small stories. And because ultimately everything you do, you want it to allow you to do the next thing, right? I mean, this the book that Small Stories did, and this film that we're doing is really going to be proof of concept. Like proof of concept that we can tell really beautiful stories and that your story matters, and even small stories can make a big difference. That whole thing, proof of concept will be now that we have these two examples of different ways to tell them. I'm also doing a lot of branding work and whatnot too. Still, that we're going to run through small stories because again, it all matters. It's all storytelling, and that's what I've been good at for so long. This documentary, though, um, the ultimate goal, I think, is to get as many eyes on it as possible. We'll do that. There will be a way to access it through the website once it's released. But also, I'm open to recommendations and suggestions on how can we get more people engaged, because it's not that I just want people to buy the movie and I want people to pay Small Stories to do this. I'm really interested in what's going to happen with the store, and how this can help support and help drive people to understanding this really awful thing that is really a lot closer to all of us than we think. These food deserts and food insecurity and missing meals, and there's so many statistics that would just absolutely devastate you if you actually were able to see that. I don't want to read a report on that. I would love to watch a beautiful film on that. And so
Is
that's
the
what
grocery store open now?
the
Is it
grocery store is slated to open mid-June. It's been a really long process to get permits, and basically they took an abandoned building and they're just completely fixing it up and making it's going to be beautiful. It's really mean, it's funny if you drive down Gary Avenue in Fairfield, you see burnout building, burnout house, broken down this, that, and the other thing, and then Urban Hope Community Church is there, and then you see Magic City Diner, which is this it's fantastic. It's so good, but Magic City Diner, and then a burned out building, and then a wig shop, and then a burned out building, and now this beautiful grocery store is going to be there. And so the hope is that this not only is a beacon for people, but that it's a source of pride for the neighborhood, to see that progress is happening. There's progress, and there's hope in progress, right? That and ultimately, what we say is, I want to tell small stories is about telling true stories that lead people to a place of hope, and you can define that hope any way that you want, but to give people a perspective that progress is being made, your story matters, and others can find some joy in what you're doing. That's ultimately what I want to do. So the store opens in June, which means the documentary is probably going to be done around mid-July, because we really want to include the celebration of grand opening and whatnot in the story. Um, we'll just play it by ear and see what happens. But you've met Aaron Spigner, you know him. He's sort of the director of photography on this. I guess I'm the director, if you will. Small Stories is producing film. We've got all these really talented guys. You even met Dustin
Yeah.
too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Dustin was
yeah.
on one of the episodes.
That's awesome. Well, so Dustin and Aaron and Eric Chapman and I went to Chicago, and we interviewed this food desert expert in Chicago, and it's just so neat to be able to work with people that not only that I like, that they're just good people, but they're so talented. And when you can surround yourself with really talented people, it's a lot easier to be good, you know.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate right now, just sort of like, I follow you on social media. I follow Aaron. I follow Dustin. Even I think it goes by something Chappie. Is it Chappie
Chapter photo,
Photos?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
I follow him as well, and being able to sort of see now or hear from you sort of what all this has been tied to, because I don't think I've fully connected the pieces. I knew you were working with them on various projects in various locations.
yeah.
Um, but I didn't know that all of it sort of fell under Small Story Studios, and I definitely didn't know the story of the
Mm.
grocery store there in Fairfield. But that's really cool to just sort of hear those connecting pieces after
Yeah,
over the past, I feel like 6 months or so that I've seen these pieces just sort of land here and there on social media. So
yeah, yeah.
I appreciate you just sharing that story. Um,
Absolutely.
Not to mention now, even more so, I look forward to actually watching the film at some point. So
Yeah,
I do
me
expect
too.
to, be present for the big. I mean, is there going to be a red carpet? Do I need to buy a suit? Or I mean, I'm
Yeah,
assuming my invitation's in the mail soon.
we'll
So
have it here. We'll have it here at the house. You and other people. No, there are some plans. We're putting some plans together to figure out how to not only uh, release it and have a big celebration for it, but how can we use it to really draw attention to these different elements and different things that we're focusing on. Not the least of which is Carver Jones, the grocery store that's going in.
right.
So yeah, there's gonna be some fun stuff around that. Midsummer probably is what we're looking at.
Nice,
So
nice.
yeah,
Well, I want to mention napkinisms. We've
yeah,
sort of alluded to it multiple times. I don't want to. I mean, first of all, that I think was my first experience with you is when you came and shared your napkinism speech at or story at our Ignite big event. Shelby County Schools does every
that's right.
year at the beginning of the year,
Yeah,
and it was incredible and hilarious,
yeah,
and there were tears in the stands.
yeah.
I don't know what kind of emotional roller coaster you normally take people on, but it seems like it's quite the experience.
Well,
And
that's
napkinism's a beautiful concept, and as a dad, I can truly appreciate it.
yeah.
Can I get you to just give like the quickest synopsis of what
Very, very
napkinism
quick.
is? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's it's probably my favorite thing. It probably is my favorite thing to talk about. It's kind of hurts my feelings to have to be quick about it. I'm kidding.
Just real quick.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So it started in 19. I'm kidding. So napkinisms. I've always put notes in my kids' lunch boxes. And it's just something that I've done, and it's usually a way for me to be encouraging. Daddy loves you or whatever when they're super young. But it turned into something more. It turned into more of my personality as my kids started growing up and becoming the people they were created to be. It's like you're able to be a little bit more real and sort of inject yourself into their situation. So it's not always about telling dad jokes. Sometimes it's about engaging in what's going on in their lives. And I just took an opportunity to write silly stuff on napkins and put it in their lunch boxes for a long, long time. I started posting them to social media because I thought I was hilarious, and, and I started posting them, and other people thought it was hilarious too. But what was fascinating was it wasn't people didn't start coming and following and sharing these messages because they thought they were funny. They were able to sort of see characters in their own story and see how other people had encouraged them throughout their lives, and that was they were connecting to these things in ways that I never intended. Again, I thought I was just being funny by posting these on social media. And Bethany, in all of her wisdom, my wife she would remind me all the time. I don't think it's what you're writing. I think it's that you're writing. And I thought she was crazy. I thought I was hilarious, and she's crazy. And no, I'm just really funny. But I started hearing stories over and over and over. People started sharing their stories with me to really confirm what she was saying. It's not what you're writing. The fact that you put a verging on obscene message on a napkin for your kid is not why these people are starting to follow and people are starting to be impacted by what you're doing. It's that you're doing it. You're consistent with it. And some people don't have a perspective of a loving father. Some people, their only picture of a family is of a broken one, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
when you're able to put yourself out there, again, make yourself vulnerable, share your story, and start to engage with people when they start sharing their stories with you. That's really when relationship happens and community happens. And I really think that a community was built around this napkinisms thing that I never intended. I mean, I don't pat myself on the back at all and say, "Look what I did," right? I mean, I more oftentimes than not go, "Look what I did," right? I put the
Yeah.
word diarrhea on a napkin and people went nuts.
Well,
But
I do want to read that one. So it's actually, first of all, let me say the video on your website is phenomenal, and it does touch on the very story, or at least one of the stories you're alluding to,
yeah,
of the woman that contacted you saying that she had grown up in an abusive family and didn't even want to have children herself, and decided,
right,
or at least you started making her think, maybe I do want to have children.
yeah.
And so, and the napkinism that is on this, I guess, thumbnail here is, remember, every time you smile, a mean kid gets diarrhea.
That's right. That's right. And listen,
That's
and I laugh because it's so ridiculous. But
it's great.
but it's sort of Billy Ivey's version of every time a bell rings, an angel gets wings, right?
So it brings a tear to my eye
So
even
it's a
now.
wonderful line. Yeah. No, but there's a story behind that too, and again, when you get into the deeper layers, it really starts to become impactful. I mean, remember, every time you smile, a mean kid gets diarrhea. That's funny on the face of the note, but I had a kid who was going through a really rough time at school. He was being bullied at school, and what do you do as a dad? I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to beat the crap out of the kids who were
Right.
making him feel less than. Um, but what kind of encouragement can you give a kid? Like, it's going to be okay. Just like, it's going to be okay.
I think
Put your feelings aside and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and it's be strong, kid. It's
slipping X-Lax into a kid's milk during lunch might
That's
be.
right. Or I do not condone that. Asterisk that is not the thing.
It
That's
was,
not Billy Ivey. That's not napkinisms.
Yeah, I did not say cause people to have diarrhea. I said don't give. I said, hey, it's really, it goes back to something that my dad taught me a long time ago. When he wrote me a message on a letter, in a letter that he wrote me. At the end of it, he just said, "Attitude is everything. Today is not yet anything. So fill it with laughter."
Mm.
And um, that perspective really does it. When I'm able to remember, when I think about that, it's so true. And we have a choice to make, right? We have a choice to make every day when we wake up. Are we going to wallow in what happened yesterday, or are we going to take a deep breath and thank God for the blessing of another day, right? There's so many different perspectives and ways that we can that manifests itself and plays itself out in everybody's life. And again, I forget almost every day. I am a tyrant a lot of times, but when you're able to look at things and go, God, it's not a big a deal. Like this is I got another opportunity to wake up today. It's hard to have that perspective. It really, really is. And especially when you're a seventh grader and people are making you feel stupid at school. So as a dad, and as Billy Ivey, the idiot who puts stuff on paper towels, it's like, hey, that's my way of saying, hey, attitude is everything. Today's not yet anything. Fill it with laughter, right? It's every time you smile, just think about that kid. He's gonna feel like crap every time so again, um, there's deeper meanings to a lot of these messages. Some of them are just stupid jokes, but a lot of them have to do with what's going on with our family, and I think that's what resonates with people. It's not what you're writing; it's that you're writing, and people can see it when you're not only being generous and grateful and kind. They're able to see when you're being um, real.
Yeah. Well, I think it's beautiful, and more. I hope people. I mean, the four people that watch this podcast, I hope they'll go and watch your video, the story of napkinisms, because hearing the story about your dad and writing left-handed note to you,
Yeah.
it's beautiful, and it's a great story, and I think napkinisms in general is pretty incredible. So I
Thank
hope more people get to hear you. I understand there's like a course that's available that basically people can go through and get your whole napkinism
Yeah,
um,
it's
story.
really a that's right. I've always thought it would be cool. I get to come go and speak at different places, and it's usually a crowd of 100 people or 20 people or whatever it is. I always thought it would
Shelby
be kind
County
of neat.
Schools was more than that. That
That
was
was a big one. That
thousands.
was
Yeah, that was a
huge.
big group.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that
was
was
that
the
was
entire Shelby County School staff and everybody. It was a great day.
terrifying. It was terrifying.
You did
Um,
great, man. It was really great.
well, thank you. But I always thought, man, it'd be kind of neat if more people could hear the whole story, because there's you can follow me on Instagram, and that's fun, or you can go to Facebook and see a napkin every once in a while, but when you hear the whole story, when you see the whole story, and really when the lesson of the story is communicated, I think that's what inspires people and is encouraging, and that ultimately that's kind of what the whole premise of napkinisms is to encourage people. It started with me trying to encourage my kids,
Right.
and then it became an opportunity to partner with different organizations and write notes for them, and that's super fun. But the talk is always fascinating to see the response from the talk, because the main message is, hey, take it from a guy who puts stupid stuff on paper towels. You don't have to do something grand to do something great. We all have an opportunity to do something great every single day. And if I can do it, even I can do it by writing stuff on paper towels, imagine what you can do. My gosh, what you're doing is so much more important and significant than me writing on paper towels. And that's sort of the whole premise. And I thought it would be kind of cool if individuals or families could sit around that message and see that message. Now, I think there are better ways. Now, feel free, go to the web, go to smallstorystudio.com, download it. It costs money, but I and that money goes to me. But what I
Right.
think what I think
Goes to support my family and the food we put on those napkins.
that's exactly right. But I will say that there's in the future there's going to be new and probably better produced ways for people to sort of consume that message. But for now, it is what it is. It's literally the presentation with me in the corner. It's basically a
Little
Zoom.
tiny you.
It's a little tiny me. It's basically a Zoom of me giving that presentation and sort of trying to share those lessons. But it is fascinating. I think it's worth your time to learn more, especially or specifically about napkinisms. You can go and get some samples of that stuff there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's great. I want to go back to the slides, and again, we've already been on here for over an hour and a half, so I apologize for taking up so much of your time.
that's
But I do
great.
want to ask you. This is something I always try to ask people: is what advice would you give this guy? And what I mean by that is, sort of thinking about the next generation, and obviously, you would tell them, to a little bit of X-Lax is always good to have on hand potentially, but but no,
Mm,
really honestly, like what would you tell this guy, knowing where he's been and what all he's gone through, or maybe the fears he had at that time, or thinking about kids now, maybe even your own kids that are at similar ages now.
that's a very tough question to answer. Um, I would say enjoy and appreciate all the hair that you have.
You're
Uh,
covering yours up with a hat right now, so we can't see.
I know. Uh, um, no, I would probably say uh, don't take yourself so seriously um, uh, and listen well. There's there I could look back at all the different people in my life as I was growing up, who have been encouragers to me and inspirations to me, and folks who have given me such good advice that I just either didn't listen to or wasn't able to hear at the time. And I think that if I was more willing to listen, more willing to engage, and more willing to be vulnerable, I probably would have learned some of the lessons that I've learned now, or some of the lessons that I've yet to learn a lot sooner. Don't take yourself so seriously, um, and listen well. There's a lot of people out there who love you. There's a lot of people out there who care deeply about you, your future, um, and that's a message I think everybody needs to hear. You're not alone, it takes a village, and you're going to find yours. That's I felt for a long time that I didn't know who I was or what I was going to do, or how I could get the things out that I wanted to say, and it took a long time. It probably took longer than it should have. So listen to the people around you. Take a deep breath. It's gonna be all right. And enjoy your hair.
Yeah, I was just talking to some guys, baseball guys. They always do this thing come playoff time where they bleach their hair.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure you've seen this. And
wrestlers. My son just did it for state
yeah,
wrestling. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
ridiculous.
So when I was in high school, the youth group one summer, a lot of the guys bleached their hair. We used peroxide and then just went out
Yeah.
in the sun, right?
Mhm.
And I may be teaching some people some things. Hopefully they won't go and do it, and then I get blamed for it, right? The 4 people that watch this, probably as old as I am, don't have any hair, so it doesn't matter. But um, when I did that, we then buzzed it, and then I
Yeah.
think shortly after that, I shaved it, and then I warned the guys. I was like, "I did that. Look at what happened to me." So it was like, be
That's
careful
right.
where you go with that stuff. So,
Yeah.
but it's always comical to think back as to what we thought about our hair back then versus
Yeah.
what we get
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Well, I had a really nice flow in high school and college.
Yeah, yeah. It looks sharp. I mean, it's all straight. Mine wasn't. Mine was wavy. I never could get to this point. It would curl up around my ears so bad I
Well,
couldn't
I got
stand
to
it.
college and I had the long. I put it behind my ears.
Yeah. I think your son that's still in high school has that kind of hair, doesn't
The
he?
college, well, both of you. I mean, Ben and
Yeah.
Abe both have great, great hair. They always have.
Yeah.
Again, I've said those words before. Enjoy your hair. because
I
you're
I
my
tell my
son, and
son
it's
all the time, I'm gonna shave his.
mm.
I tell my daughters, I've got 3 daughters and 1 son. I threaten all the time to shave their heads. I'm
Yeah.
tired of dealing with hair, finding hair everywhere, it's just yeah. It's not mine, I
Yeah,
know that, but yet I'm pulling it off of me, so
yeah.
but, all right, so I wanna find out there's 2 more things. I wanna find out what's next, and then the last question I'll pose to you. So
Yeah.
what's next for Billy Ivy, for Napkinisms, for Small Stories, all the things we've
Well,
talked about?
it's napkinisms has kind of taken a backseat to a lot of other things, and not from a priority standpoint as far as what I like, what I love, but again, my kids are all driving themselves to school. My kids, they either are making their own lunches or they're buying it at school, and so I don't have that prompt every morning to say, okay, you got to make their lunch, you got to put the napkin in there. So that's kind of fallen off a little bit. But I still love the story. I love the lesson so much, and I still from time to time write messages. There is a plan for that moving forward. So I think the napkins are gonna pick back up here pretty soon, because I just love doing it, and I think it's important to keep that engagement going. Um, but that's not a business model or a business perspective. I think with respect to small stories, it's going to be over the next 4 or 5 months. We're really going to be working hard on trying to get this documentary completed and get it to where it needs to be. Um, but there's a lot of other opportunities too. There are several other projects that I won't necessarily talk about here, just because I don't want to overpromise, under deliver necessarily. We're still trying to work some things out, but ultimately the goal really is to find, develop, and share the stories of other people, and to really serve as an encouragement and a place of hope for folks. And so there's plenty of different ways that we're going to do that, through print and also through mini series, perhaps, of
Yeah.
little clips and vignettes of people's stories. Um,
Well, if
so
you need a podcast that you wanna, like, take over and invest in, and, I mean, just see where
yeah, I yeah, I'll give you
I'm
everything
sure
I
we could
got
work
as
something
far as investment. Yeah. Well,
out.
there's 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 lots on the horizon. I think for small stories, we're still trying to figure out what that really looks like. But ultimately, I'm not going to stop branding work. I'm not going to stop marketing work. I'm not going to stop trying to engage in different brands and tell those stories either. So there's an element to small stories, is sort of a branch of the tree that is going to still be focused on doing that work. So always looking to engage with people and tell stories that way. But some of these more passion projects are the things that I get super excited about, and more to come.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Well, and you're soon to be empty nesters, right? I mean, how old's your youngest child, or what grade is your youngest child in?
He's currently a sophomore, so we're getting closer.
Yeah,
Um,
knocking on
super,
that door.
yeah, very close. We had, you know, my 24-year-old daughter, she graduated a while ago, but then Ben graduated gosh, I don't know what year. Anyway, Ben graduated, and then Mary Cannon graduated the next year, and then we had this
Yeah.
past year. We don't have to do graduation this year, but then we're gonna have Abe's gonna graduate and Quinn's gonna graduate right behind him. So it's we're getting ready. We're getting ready for a sprint, which will lead us to. I mean, they come back, man.
No,
They
don't
all
say
come.
that. Don't say
They
that.
do, they do. Annabelle, I mean, yes, they do. From time to time, they come back, which I'm
Mm.
grateful for. Honestly, it's a weird place to be when you start realizing that you are the cliche. In the cliche of being time flies, and the what is it, the long days, short years, or whatever that stupid quote is. It's absolutely true. It's fascinating to look back 10 years ago and say, "Good grief!" Like, it's how much time's gone by and how quickly it goes. So I enjoy the fact that they come back. I want them to come back because it makes me uh, it makes me realize that, or when they're here, I feel like I'm a little bit younger, and I have more responsibilities than I probably do. But
Well, and I think as our kids get older, we're able to appreciate the memories, and then watch those memory, like, look in them today and remember sort of what's made them that,
Yeah,
at least I'm seeing a little bit of that now. My kids are still like 16s. My twins are 16. So,
yeah,
and then I've got a 11 and 9. So, they're still relatively young, but more and more I feel that a little nostalgic
yeah.
towards even
Well,
even talking about it whenever they were babies.
yeah, absolutely. Well, the app Time Hop, you
Yeah,
probably got Time Hop, and that's excruciating. I mean, I hate that because it just, you look at 10 years ago. No, that couldn't have been 10 years ago. That was
right,
that was last summer.
right.
So yeah, I'm becoming the cliche, and that's both exciting and really really sad.
Families
So
families are a beautiful thing, and we earn every beauty with the ugly side of it at
that's
times.
right.
So,
That's
um,
right.
all right. Well, last question here: who inspires you? And I have to sort of, I guess, um, lead off with the idea. I ask everybody this question. Aaron Spigner referenced you directly as somebody that inspires him
Hmm.
creatively, and that's really sort of the idea for this is that I find out who inspires my previous person, and then that's hopefully who I at least at some point will have as a guest.
Yeah,
A lot of people have gotten to where now they'll list off like 3 or 4 people, and I'm like, well,
yeah,
eventually I'll get to like number 2, 3, and 4.
yeah,
But anyway, so I asked that like creatively in your the work you do, maybe past work that you've done or people that you've been around. Who really
yeah.
inspires the stuff that you do today, or has inspired you to sort of be the creative that you are now?
It is a tough question because there are a lot of people, and I could list off a bunch of them. I have I have for I would say the most consistent answer to that question over the years of like who's not who inspires you necessarily, but sort of mentor. The the first person that comes to mind, and he would probably question and go, "Why in the world would you say me?" But his name's Gary Brandon, and Gary was a creative director at an agency I worked for in Nashville. Um, he I think the reason why I love him so much and why he inspired me and really moves me. What he does and how he did what he did moved me so much is because there's such a grace with what he does and how he carries himself, and there's a genuine kindness um, to him, and a generosity of spirit, but also he was always so willing to engage, and he would never ever ever look at something that I did or that other people did, and I didn't. I mean, frankly, I never worked directly for him. I was just outside of the creative department at this agency, where sometimes they would let me play around a little bit, and sometimes they'd let me get in there and throw a headline up on the wall or whatever. But watching him work within the creative department and watch him work with the people, and again, I think he just kind of liked me as a person, and so he allowed me to tag along every once in a while. But he would never look at something I did or anybody else did and say, "Yeah, I think you can do better." He would always say, "Okay, let's talk about this for a second. Let's you know, I see what you did there. Can you talk? Can you tell me why? Can you tell, now? What if you thought about it from that's one perspective. What if we thought about it from this perspective?" So he just it's such a kindness to to how he handled things. I've also had creative directors who were the exact opposite, like who would you'd be sitting there and they'd come stand over your shoulder and trying to type out a paragraph, and they're like, "Move, get up,
Well, they're
get
they're
up."
seeing you do this.
See me do this, and it pisses them off, and so they like, how in the world did I hire this guy? But they'll be like, just move. I got it. I got it. And somebody who's willing to just take the time and to have a kindness about what they do because they care deeply about the craft or whatever. He's just always been such a great example. He's a super funny guy. He's a great writer. But just from a thinker stand, he's just such a deep thinker and would cause the people around him to think more deeply about whatever they were thinking about. And so he would be the first person I would say is has inspired me, and not even I can't even put my finger on a specific work that he did, right? I mean, it's not like, oh, that campaign, it just changed my life. It wasn't about that with him. Um, I actually can think of some things he did, and it was brilliant, but it was more than that for me. I just loved him as a person, as a man, and respected the heck out of how he carried himself and how he led other people. So Gary
What
is fantastic.
what's he do now? What is he still working
Gary now
for that?
he worked for a long time after he and I worked together. He's been in various agencies. He recently left Lewis Communications, which they've got an office in Birmingham. He ran the Nashville office. He recently left Lewis to start his own company. It's a um, I don't want to get into exactly what it is, but he's basically started a new company with his children, which is super cool. His daughter and his son are now his partners in the business that they're working in. So it's a very specific and specialized marketing is what he's doing now. But he and I still keep in touch. He was there to help celebrate the first book launch that we did, and we continue to text back and forth every once in a while. But he's just a neat dude. Um, and then another person who just inspires me because of what they do and how they do it. And you've heard me mention his name. You've probably heard other people mention his name. Would be Eric Chapman. Eric's here in Birmingham, and again, he does beautiful work, and he's so talented. I, I don't even think he would argue with you if you called him the best sound guy in Birmingham. I mean, because he's that focused and qualified to do what he does with sound. It's just gorgeous, and he speaks he can talk the talk and tell you why things work and why things don't and what matters and all that stuff. And that's a fascinating thing. Sound design is beautiful, and sound design is important. But what I think I'm inspired by most is he's got an eye for photography. He's just a really gifted storyteller through photography. He can see things. He can and he can orchestrate story through a single picture, and it's just fascinating to me. I don't have that. I don't have. I can see in my head what I want it to sound like and what I want it to feel like and what I want people to see. But he can actually make it happen just by being present. And again, it's kind of like Gary. I mean, Eric is such a kind, generous, sweet guy who, and he's interested. There's a curiosity to him that oh wow, oh yeah, oh wow. Just there's always this oh wow, and tell me more about that. And probably, again, he would blush at this, but he's a really great storyteller. He can tell a great story, and I don't just mean you know conceptually from a photograph. He literally will make you laugh until you cry or pass out just because of how gifted he is at communicating.
Now,
So
when
those are two guys that I just love. They couldn't be more different, but also the same. I think the reasons why I love them and I appreciate them and I respect what they do is because of how they do it. And both with a lot of generosity. They're both very gracious and generous, but I don't know, just sweet guys, great souls.
when you and Eric work together, is he predominantly doing audio, or is he predominantly doing photo, or is he? Because I mean, the times you've traveled together, or is what kind of role is he serving on those
Um,
trips?
I get the benefit. Usually it's we'll hire. And Aaron Spike and I work a lot with Aaron, Air 7 Media, and that's usually more often than not. That's when Eric is hired to work on a project. I don't think I've ever hired Eric to do photography, but one of the benefits of having Eric as not only a friend, but as somebody who he can't help himself. He's going to take pictures, So when we recently went to Chicago, he was there. His role was to capture sound because he's going to do the sound design on this film. Um, but but we had the benefit of getting a lot of great photography from that trip as well. One of the key things that I look forward to doing over the next, I would say 8 to 12 months is going to be working with Eric specifically, using his photography skills. It's something that he and I have sort of gone back and forth on, and I'm gonna kind of force him to do it because I mean, he's gonna want to do it because it's going to be super fun. But I can't wait to work with him in that capacity because he really is that good, gifted. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. He's kind of a unicorn, you know. I mean, he can do it all. I've never seen anything that he's written, but judging by how he can tell a story, I'm assuming he'd be a really great writer too.
Well, it sounds like both of those would be great options for me to explore as
Yeah,
having somebody on. I've mostly kept it in Birmingham, but I would love to reach out to somebody in Nashville. I think that'd be really great.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
I'm sure he would be gracious enough to do it. He would probably push back and say he didn't say it. I'm not that guy, but he is that guy. He always has
yeah.
been.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, listen, that's all that I've got as far as this interview goes. I really do appreciate you taking the time. I mean,
It's
at
my
this point,
pleasure. I'm
almost
sorry.
2 hours. So I'm
I'm sorry I
sorry
went
that
so
it's
long. No,
no,
it's
no, no. It's not you at all. It's I love it, man. I mean, it's hearing your stories, getting to know you a little bit more, even if it's through a screen. I
yeah.
appreciate it. So seriously.
Well, I would say this too, Brian, and I mean this sincerely. I mean, I I think we need to work together. I think we need to figure out how to do work together because what you do, where you do it, and the limitations that you may sometimes have. Your work is also beautiful, and I respect the heck out of what you're able to do, in your position with with Shelby County Schools and what you're doing with them. You're able to capture things that a lot of storytellers wouldn't be able to. So I commend you on that, and I think we'll have plenty of opportunities to do some cool stuff together. Hopefully,
Yeah, yeah.
Bethany tells me that all the time. She's like, you need to call Brian. Y'all got to work together. All right, well, we'll figure it out. But not just because she's going to make me. I really, I really do appreciate you, and I think that you're really good at what you do. So I appreciate doing this. You doing this too. I think the podcast is a great idea. I love sort of building on creative foundations, meaning asking somebody who inspires them, moving that and building that web of people is kind of neat because what I find is that we and I don't mean this in a cheesy way, but we are kind of all connected, right? I mean, the fact that Aaron and I work so closely together, and I don't know who but was it Dustin who told you to talk to
Yeah.
Aaron? Yeah, so
Yeah, so
it's
Dustin
just neat.
Dustin Dustin was one that I reached out to more spontaneously, just because Dustin inspires me with the
Mm,
stuff that I've seen from him, and we've got a mutual friend that was a former student of mine that
yeah,
has a lot of respect for him. But yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, I've talked with people that I never thought I would ever talk to because of this
yeah,
podcast,
yeah,
and it's people that I respect just by what I've seen on social media in the area. I mean, it doesn't take long before on social media you start connecting some dots with people,
yeah,
and so being able to connect the dots in this podcast and shine a light on just the talented people that we have right here in Central Alabama,
yeah.
it's been really cool so far to get to do it.
It is cool, and it can be daunting and it can be intimidating until you get to know those people. And I think that's what's neat about this is you get to sort of know somebody through conversations like this, and it becomes a lot less intimidating and more exciting. It's like, oh man, I think I could really connect with that guy. I think we could help each other. So that's kind of cool. I mean, when you look at all the talent around you, you're like, golly, I can't fit with that, or I'm too old for them, or I can't really connect with those people. You realize, I mean, this is we're all kind of in it for the same reasons, or at least I hope so, and
Yeah.
and that's a kind of a cool thing. So it's you know connecting
I
creative
don't.
creators,
Yeah,
creating
the
connecting creators.
podcast. Appreciate you. You're trying to weave the web. I don't know that it really the name and the brand initially it was two different directions. It's a long story that this podcast episode is not about, but um, But no, it's been really good. I've wrestled recently with the idea of not doing it. I
Hmm.
literally because I had already reached out to you, and at one point I thought this may be the last one I do. Um, and then just as I was thinking that, a buddy of mine started encouraging me, and he was like,
Hmm.
"It's such a great thing," and I was like, "Man, it's a lot of work outside of the actual interview itself, which I
Yeah.
love the interview, but then the work after that, I'm like." Is it really something that I keep? Not to mention, got a wife and four kids and
Right.
full time job and all that, but then just this past week, some guys on Instagram directly messaged me or commented and sort of connected some more pieces, and I was like, that was the encouragement I needed,
Yeah.
and super
Isn't that
thankful for them.
fascinating? It's fast. Well, that's beautiful, and I love that, and that because that's powerful. Like encouragement is powerful, but isn't it fascinating too how desperate we are for that? Like, and again, maybe it's just people, but most of my time is spent around creative people, and we are so needy for that encouragement. We just are. I mean, but it is neat too to see every time I feel discouraged or every time I feel like I gotta I gotta figure something out. I gotta figure something else out. I'll get a text message or a phone call or somebody will leave a message or whatever that is just enough, just enough fuel to put in the tank to keep going. And sometimes the tank is overflowing and it's great. And sometimes you're about to die out, but um, I think that's an important thing to remember as creators. Um, when somebody inspires you, when somebody does something that is good or encourages you or makes you feel something or that you're like, holy cow, it's mind-blowingly good. Don't just tell yourself that. Don't just be like, man, that guy's really good. Tell that guy, because
Yeah,
that guy's probably going through exactly what you went through a couple of weeks ago. It's probably exactly what I was going through a month ago of just, I gotta quit. I mean, I battle with that all the time.
yeah, yeah.
And sometimes hearing it from people who you don't know like well is a lot more powerful from hearing it. My wife tells me I'm great all the time. You're good. I'm like, God,
Yours
I don't
does.
I
Yours
don't
does.
really believe.
I don't.
Well, I mean, she, but you know what I mean. Like you get
In her
encouragement
own
from
way,
people.
right?
Yeah, that's right. You
Yeah,
get
you
encouragement
idiot.
from people who love you, and that means something and it's powerful, and I want to hear it. I crave that too. But when somebody appreciates your work or appreciates you and they're not required to make you feel good, uh, that's powerful. And so that would be my last thing of encouragement. Not that anybody asked, but yeah, when you feel that, you see that when you're feeling that, just remember how it makes you feel when somebody else applauds your work or encourages you or asks you to keep going, because that's we need it. We all need it.
Well,
Um,
and like we said earlier, you can make something beautiful, but if it doesn't really meet the need that it was intended for, what's the point in it?
yeah,
And that was sort of the way I was feeling about this is I wasn't sure that it was even reaching the audience that I had intended it for, which is creatives. I mean, the
yeah,
idea is that this if people that don't know Billy Ivy, but that could collaborate with Billy Ivy at some point or learn from Billy Ivy or just, be able to have a shared experience with Billy Ivy's story. Like that's sort of the goal, is to connect to those people. And that's exactly what happened this week is people that are my intended audience for this reached out to me and was like, appreciate the podcast, man. And it's,
that's
again,
awesome.
like the views, I don't even know. Like,
Yeah,
there's some of these that have very few number of views, but when it's a specialized niche, so to speak, I feel like those views matter a little bit more. And
yeah.
definitely whenever you get feedback from them, it's nice.
Well, we again we lie to ourselves that the vanity numbers can be deceiving, right? I mean, it's again, it's like an award show. You can win an award for
Yeah.
doing something that you never intended in the first place.
An
There's
effing
vanity
award.
numbers. That's right. That's right. But like, if three people see this, and this is if three people see this and are inspired by it and can make connections off of this, then guess what? Your audience just grew. If 12 people see it and nobody connects out of it, then who freaking cares, right? And that's
Exactly.
that's it's like I've learned that through book sales. It's like, you
Yeah.
look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, nobody's buying this book. That's not true. The 12 people who bought it last month, 9 of them have written and saying that it's life changing. Well, what's the point if that's not the point, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
if the point is to sell a bunch of books, then I wouldn't be writing books about, you know, a kid born to sharecroppers in the shadow of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I'd be writing, I don't know what I'd do, something on,
Murder mystery.
yeah, Dua Lipa or whatever. Like, I'd try to figure out how to ride Taylor Swift's coattails or something. I don't know, but anyway. Sometimes we can fool ourselves into believing that those vanity numbers are more important than real people. So.
Well, in respect to all those vanity numbers, I do need to thank my mom for watching this week's episode of Creating Creators Podcast.
Hey, Mom.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, seriously, Billy, again, thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining me on this. Your stories are incredible and inspirational and encouraging and hilarious. And and I say that, I know I'm like gloating on you. I don't even know that that's the right word, but you're the wordsmith. You make it whatever you want it to be. But
Yeah.
anyway,
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Thank you. Thank you. But seriously, I enjoy and look forward to even more stories from you. And I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you, Brian. It means a lot. I appreciate it.